The dungeons beneath the Red Keep were cold, damp, and smelled of old blood and rotting secrets. But Lord Eddard Stark, once Warden of the North, sat quietly, his head high, even as his bones ached. His beard had grown rough, and his eyes were tired, but the fire in his heart still burned. He thought of Winterfell, of his daughters, and of the lies that had brought him here. But this time, fate had other plans. Varys, the Whispering Spider, entered his cell that night, but instead of his usual riddles, he brought a key, a cloak, and a plan. "The realm needs a just man," Varys whispered, "and you are not meant to die here, Lord Stark." Ned hesitated. He had accepted death, had prepared for it, but he thought of Arya, still somewhere in the city. He thought of Sansa, prisoner of the Lannisters. And he remembered what Robert Baratheon had once told him: "You were meant to rule, not follow." So when the black of night came, Ned Stark escaped the Red Keep with the help of Varys and a few loyal gold cloaks who still respected the name Stark. He didn't run. He didn't hide. He went straight to the last man he could trust in King's Landing, Sir Barristan Selmy. Sir Barristan, honorable and disgusted by Joffrey's madness, helped Ned gather what remained of Robert's loyal men. Word spread like wildfire: Eddard Stark lives, and with that truth, the capital stirred. Ned didn't waste time. He knew that if the Lannisters struck first, the North would fall. So he sent a raven to Robb Stark in Riverrun, telling him to hold the Riverlands and wait. He needed time, and more importantly, he needed allies. Tyrion Lannister, caught between family loyalty and his own sharp mind, realized something dangerous. If Stark lived, the war was far from over. Tywin would not be pleased. Cersei's fury was unchained. She wanted Ned's head again. But it was too late. The city was turning. Small folk whispered that the lioness had lied. Some gold cloaks refused her orders. Even Littlefinger, sensing a shift in power, pulled back from the game, for once unsure of the outcome. Meanwhile, Ned Stark took temporary command of the Red Keep's walls with Sir Barristan and men who still honored their vows. He sent ravens north, west, and south, calling for the great lords to stand against Lannister treachery. Riverrun was already in his favor. The Vale, long quiet under Lysa Arryn, stirred after a message from Ned's own hand. He reminded her of Jon Arryn's death, of what they once fought for. And perhaps guilt made her listen. But Ned's true gamble was in the Stormlands. He sent a message to Stannis Baratheon. "You are Robert's true heir. I know the truth of Joffrey's blood. Come to King's Landing. Fight for your crown." Stannis, always rigid, always cold, saw something in those words: honor, truth, and an opportunity. As all of Westeros buzzed with new rumors of a living Stark, of a call for justice, the war that had already begun took a new shape. In the north, Robb Stark smiled. For the first time in weeks, his father lived. The king in the north had a partner now, not just in blood, but in strategy. Winter was still coming, but now it marched with fire in its steps. In King's Landing, Eddard Stark stood on a balcony overlooking the city, now half loyal, half rebellious. He wasn't a man of politics, but war. He understood. And he would not stop until the truth came to light. The Lannisters were brought to justice, and his family was safe again. Game of Thrones had changed. The North had a voice in the South, and for the first time in a long while, hope stirred in the hearts of the people. But Ned knew this was just the beginning. Blood would be spilled, betrayals would come, and some old friends might become enemies. But he was ready, because this time Ned Stark would not kneel. The wind over King's Landing carried a strange silence, like the city itself held its breath. Inside the Red Keep, Eddard Stark paced across the war room. He was no longer a prisoner. He was a commander now. But with freedom came the weight of choices, ones that could break the realm or save it. Sir Barristan stood nearby, placing markers on the map spread across the table. The city is uneasy, my lord. The gold cloaks are split. Some remain loyal to Queen Cersei. Others are beginning to question everything. Ned nodded grimly. We need to move fast, before Tywin Lannister arrives with an army. Outside the walls, chaos brewed. Varys's spies whispered of Lannister forces gathering near Harrenhal, and of Tywin sending ravens to secure alliances. The Queen Regent, furious at Ned's escape, had retreated to Maegor's Holdfast with Joffrey and her loyal knights. She had not yet struck, but her silence was dangerous. Ned sent messengers to the city's gates. He promised protection to any guard who laid down their sword against the crown, and mercy to those who joined him. He also declared the truth publicly, through loud criers in the streets. Joffrey Baratheon was not Robert's son. The news hit like wildfire. Some cheered, others wept in disbelief. A few rebelled in Cersei's name. But most just watched, waiting to see who would win. That night, the city flared with riots. A mob of small folk stormed the Lion Gate, shouting for justice. Queen Cersei tried to crush the riot by ordering Sir Meryn Trant and the Kingsguard to cut them down. Instead, the gold cloaks hesitated. Two of them joined the crowd, turning their spears on their captain. Inside the keep, Ned watched from the battlements. "Your truth is spreading," said Varys quietly beside him. "But truth is a blade with no handle, my lord. It cuts all who touch it." Ned didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the rising smoke across the city. Fire had started near Flea Bottom. The Queen's desperate attempt to hold power was now igniting civil war within the capital itself. The next morning, a raven arrived from the north. It bore Robb Stark's seal. "Father, I hold the Riverlands." The Freys have honored their word for now. Tywin's forces pressed near the Trident. I await your command. The North is with you. Ned clenched the letter in his hand. His son had done what few boys could. He had held the line. But the war ahead needed more than bravery. He turned to Sir Barristan and Varys. "We strike before Tywin crosses the Blackwater." "But with what army?" Barristan asked. Ned stepped back from the table. "With the people, with honor, and with fire." Later that day, Ned made a bold move. He sent Sansa, still kept like a dove in a cage under heavy protection, to the Sept of Baelor. There, with the High Septon present, she stood before the people and confessed her family's pain. "My father is no traitor," she said, her voice cracking. "The Queen lied. Joffrey is not the rightful king." The Sept fell silent, and then cheers erupted. Not all believed her, but enough did. Enough to shift the tide. From behind the scenes, Littlefinger watched with narrowed eyes. His plans were crumbling. Power was slipping from his grasp, and Stark Onodam, foolish as it was, had become something dangerous, popular. But not everyone in the capital wanted justice. That very night, an assassin tried to kill Ned Stark in his sleep. Only Arya, sneaking through the corridors like a shadow, saw the man before he struck. She screamed, and Ned awoke just in time to fend him off with a dagger to the gut. The man died whispering one word: Lannister. Ned looked at Arya afterward, her face pale but fierce. "You saved my life," he told her. "I've been watching, father," she said. "The Queen's sending more. We need to leave." "No," Ned said, wiping the blood from his hands. "We stay. We end this here. I won't run again." Outside the city, a new banner approached, fiery red, with a black stag crowned in gold. Stannis Baratheon had answered the call, and now, with a true king at his back, Ned Stark was ready to finish what should have ended with Robert's rebellion. The gates of King's Landing trembled as thunder echoed in the distance, not from the skies, but from the hooves of thousands. Stannis Baratheon had arrived. His army was smaller than Tywin's, but disciplined, burning with the fury of justice. At its head rode a man of stone and fire, his face unreadable, his jaw clenched, like a blade yet to be drawn. Beside him rode Sir Davos Seaworth, the Onion Knight, and behind them banners of the fiery heart of Relor waved above steel-clad soldiers. Ned Stark stood atop the battlements, his grey eyes narrowing as he watched the dust rise along the horizon. "Came," Ser Barristan murmured beside him. Ned gave a small nod. "He's not here for me, he's here for the crown. But that makes us allies for now." Inside the Red Keep, Queen Cersei felt the shift in the air, her hold on the throne weakened by the hour. She clutched Joffrey's hand tightly, her nails digging into his soft flesh. "We must flee," Grand Maester Pycelle mumbled, beads of sweat rolling down his cheeks. "The city's turning, Your Grace. If we wait, we die." Cersei turned to him with a cold smile. "If I die, Pycelle, it will not be running. I will not give these wolves the satisfaction." But she wasn't smiling inside. Her power was crumbling, and every whisper in the halls felt like a dagger in the dark. Meanwhile, Stannis rode through the city gates, not as a conqueror, but as the true-born brother of Robert Baratheon, heir by law and blood. His soldiers met little resistance. Ned's public declaration had weakened the Queen's grip enough that the small folk no longer defended the crown. They watched from windows, from alleyways, as a new king passed by. Ned met Stannis in the grand hall. No crowns sat on either man's head. No smiles were exchanged. "Lord Stark," Stannis said, his voice sharp as frost, "you've caused quite the storm." "I exposed a lie," Ned replied, "and stood by the truth." That storm was already coming. Stannis studied him for a long moment. "And yet you kept the truth secret for weeks while Robert still breathed." Ned met his gaze, unflinching. "To protect my daughters and to avoid war." "There is no avoiding war," Stannis said coldly. "There is only justice." Davos stepped forward, his voice gentler. "We are grateful you held the city, Lord Stark. Without your stand, this would have ended in chaos." But Stannis wasn't finished. "I will take the throne, but Joffrey and his ilk must face trial, and so must all who supported this falsehood. You'll turn the capital into a graveyard," Ned warned. "We need peace, not another purge." Stannis's jaw tightened. Peace built on mercy for traitors is no peace at all. Ned knew then that he wasn't facing a mad king, but a cold one. Righteous, unbending, perhaps too unbending. That evening, Sansa and Arya were reunited with their father. Arya clung to him like a shadow. Sansa, pale and shaken, wept in his arms. "I told them the truth," she said through her tears. "I wasn't brave at first, but I told them." Ned kissed her forehead. "You were brave when it mattered." But their reunion was short-lived. That night, Lannister loyalists inside the Red Keep made one last attempt. Disguised as city guards, they tried to kidnap Tommen and Myrcella, planning to flee with them to Casterly Rock, where Tywin waited. But Arya, always wandering where she shouldn't be, spotted them again. This time, she followed them, dagger in hand. She didn't hesitate. The blood stained her clothes, her hands, her face. When Ned found her in the corridor, kneeling beside one of the corpses, she looked up and simply said, "They were taking the children." Ned knelt, holding her close. "You shouldn't have had to see this." "I didn't see it, Father," she whispered. "I did it. Winter was growing in her too. By morning, Joffrey had vanished. Whispers said Cersei had smuggled him out of the city through secret tunnels. But the throne sat empty, now its silence louder than war drums. Stannis stood before it, hand resting on the cold steel of the Iron Throne. Ned stood behind him, watching history take shape. But he knew something deep in his bones. The war was not over. Tywin was coming. And the lion never forgets. catapults and fury, because his blood sat on the run, and his name had been spat upon in the capital. Tywin was not a man who forgave. He was a man who crushed. Stannis held the parchment with a clenched jaw. "Let him come," he growled. "We'll meet him in the field. Burn his pride with fire and justice." But Ned had seen war. He had seen what blind pride and cold honor could do to cities, to children, to kings. And he knew King's Landing wouldn't survive another sack, not with fire so close under its skin. "No," Ned said firmly. "We don't meet him on the field. That's what he wants. He wants blood in the mud. He wants to break you before you even wear the crown." Stannis raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you suggest, Stark? We hide behind walls while his men starve the city?" "We hold the city with strategy," Ned replied, "and we bleed him before he reaches our gates." Stannis's eyes narrowed. "Speak plainly." And so Ned laid it out. They would not meet Tywin in open war, but ambush his foraging lines, burn his food supplies, poison his wells along the road, and harass his scouts with guerrilla tactics. It was the way of the North: fight from the shadows when you cannot win in the light. Let winter fight beside you. Davos nodded in agreement. "He's right. Draw Tywin into anger." "He's right. Draw Tywin into anger. Make him reckless. Then strike." For the first time Stannis listened, and so it began. By nightfall ravens flew from the Red Keep to the Riverlands, to Robb Stark, to the Stormlords still scattered. The message was simple: stall Tywin, starve him, bleed him. Meanwhile, inside the city, the Iron Throne remained empty. Stannis refused to sit until it was truly his, and the people, watching the banners change and kings come and go, began to grow restless once more. Fear returned in whispers. What if Tywin wins? What if the lions return? Cersei's ghost still haunted the halls of the Red Keep. Her chambers had been ransacked, yet no sign of her remained. Joffrey was gone too, vanished into smoke. Some said he sailed for Dragonstone. Others claimed he rode for Casterly Rock dressed as a beggar boy. No one knew the truth, and that made him more dangerous. But danger wasn't only outside the walls. Littlefinger, the master of coin turned master of whispers, re-emerged with a smile that could hide daggers. He approached Ned in the gardens one night, walking slowly, hands behind his back. "You're winning, Lord Stark," he said softly. "But do you know what happens to men who win too early?" Ned narrowed his eyes. "I know what happens to liars." "Of course," Littlefinger chuckled. "You think I betrayed you, and I did, but look how far you've come. You should be thanking me." "You put a knife at my throat," Ned said coldly. Littlefinger stepped closer. "And I could do it again, if I wanted to, but I'm here to help now. Because Tywin will not lose, not unless we cheat. I won't win this war by becoming like the Lannisters." Littlefinger smirked. "Then you won't win at all." He left, but his words lingered. That night, Ned met with Robb's envoy, young Ser Brynden, Blackfish Tully, who brought troubling news. The Freys were stalling. They hadn't closed their gates, but neither had they fully committed to Robb. Lord Walder was waiting to see who wore the crown next. Ned cursed under his breath. That old snake is playing both sides. Brynden nodded. "And if Tywin offers him gold and marriage ties, he'll sell you for a song." So once again, Ned faced a choice: abandon honor and strike first, or trust men who wore smiles like masks. In the dark of his chambers, Ned wrote a single letter to Catelyn. He told her of Arya's strength, of Sansa's courage, of the city turning beneath his feet. But one line stood out among the rest. "This war will end soon, but what kind of world will we be left with, Cat? One ruled by justice or by fear?" He sealed it, unsure of the answer himself, and far away, across the Riverlands, Tywin Lannister read Ned Stark's call for surrender and burned it in his fire. The Lion was coming, and he was bringing vengeance. The fires of war glowed on the horizon as word spread through King's Landing. Tywin Lannister had crossed the Blackwater. Though his army had been harassed, slowed, and starved, it had not been broken. Burned wagons and poisoned wells had left him snarling, but not retreating. In fact, the attacks had only made him angrier, and when Tywin was angry, blood always followed. Inside the city walls, Ned Stark prepared for the worst. The small folk were terrified. Many began fleeing through the eastern gate, hoping to find safety in the countryside, not knowing they were walking toward chaos. Others hoarded food, boarded up their homes, and whispered prayers to the Seven, or whatever god still listened. But Eddard Stark didn't pray. He planned. Stannis had taken command of the outer defenses, his discipline turning the ragged city guard into something resembling an army. Davos controlled the Blackwater Bay, preparing ships with wildfire, the Mad King's leftover secret. Even Ned had to admit the stuff was monstrous, but if used right, it could save thousands. Meanwhile, Ser Barristan trained the remaining gold cloaks loyal to justice, not the crown. They would hold the Red Keep if it came to that, but the heart of the city still beat nervously. And then, a surprise. A raven arrived from the north bearing the direwolf seal of House Stark. It carried a message from Robb. "I march south. The River Lords ride with me. Walder Frey has stalled long enough. I forced his hand with marriage promises I do not intend to honor. The lion will not have the trident. I will cut him off before he reaches you." Ned let out a long breath. Relief touched him for a moment. Robb had grown into more than a boy. He was now a wolf of war, but even wolves could die if they bit off too much. Later that night, a council gathered in the war room. Stannis, Davos, Ned, and Varys stood around the great table. "We strike now," Stannis said. "We take the fight to Tywin before he surrounds the city. Meet him at the fields by the Mudgate. Let him feel our steel." Ned disagreed. "No, he expects that. Tywin always expects men to play by the rules. That's how he wins." Davos glanced at both men. "Then what do we do?" Ned stepped forward and pointed at the map. "We bait him." He laid out the plan. Stannis would take half the forces and make a show of riding north, pretending to reinforce Robb. Meanwhile, Davos would move the fleet downriver silently under fog, hiding wildfire barrels in the water near the Blackwater crossings. Ned himself would remain behind, baiting Tywin with a false parley offer, pretending the city was weak and unprepared. And when Tywin tried to cross, they'd burn the river beneath him. Risky, costly, but maybe, just maybe, it could work. And so it began. Over the next 2 days, the city braced. Stannis rode out with banners high, his armor gleaming in the sun. To spies, it looked like a retreat. Davos disappeared with his ships under cover of fog and moonlight, sailing like a ghost downriver. And Ned, he stood atop the gates of King's Landing with a white flag raised, sending ravens to Tywin, demanding parley. Tywin laughed when he read the letter. "Stark thinks I'm blind," he growled to his commanders. "Let him open the gates himself. I'll walk through with his head on a pike." And so the trap was set. On the third morning, Tywin's army reached the southern crossing of the Blackwater. Scouts reported the river calm, the city quiet, and no signs of naval defense. He ordered the crossing. Thousands of Lannister men poured into the water wagons, horses, siege engines. Archers took their positions, and then green fire erupted. The wildfire barrels, hidden beneath the black surface, exploded with a scream of heat. The river boiled. Men burned alive, trapped between water and flame. Horses shrieked. Metal melted. Panic rippled through the Lannister ranks. From the cliffs above, Davos's ships unleashed flaming arrows onto the second wave. Fire spread across the river like a plague. And from the north, Robb Stark struck. He hit Tywin's rear flank like a thunderclap. Tully riders, northern spears, and outraged river lords roaring for vengeance. The Lannister line twisted in confusion, then cracked. Caught between fire and fury, Tywin's army fractured. Thousands died, thousands more fled, and Tywin himself, he escaped barely. Carried by his knights, wounded and furious, he retreated west under cover of chaos. King's Landing did not fall. It roared. That night, the people filled the streets, cheering the names of Ned Stark, Stannis Baratheon, and Robb the Young Wolf. But inside the Red Keep, Ned sat alone. He knew Tywin would return, and next time he wouldn't make the same mistake. The smell of smoke still lingered days after the battle, clinging to the stones of King's Landing like a warning. But the city had been saved. From the towers of the Red Keep to the muddy alleys of Flea Bottom, the people chanted a new name, now not Joffrey, not Robert, not even Stannis. Stark. They whispered it with awe. They shouted it in victory songs. In the brothels, in the bakeries, in the gutters, children wore makeshift cloaks of grey and white. The wolf had become a symbol not just of war, but of survival. But Eddard Stark felt none of that pride. He stood in the throne room as workmen replaced shattered columns and polished blood from the floors. The Iron Throne still sat empty, a jagged beast of twisted blades and stolen crowns. And before it stood Stannis Baratheon, still unbent, still cold as the steel he claimed. "You have your city," Ned said quietly. "You have the people's ear and the realm's attention. What comes next?" Stannis didn't blink. Justice. Order. The Lannisters must be rooted out, every last one. I will not sit the throne while traitors breathe in my kingdom. "You mean children?" Ned asked, his voice sharp. Stannis turned to face him. "I mean threats. Myrcella and Tommen carry Lannister blood. Their claim is false, and yet they live. Do you think Tywin will not use them?" Ned stepped forward, jaw tight. "They are children, not soldiers. Children become rulers," Stannis replied coldly. "You of all men should know what happens when mercy replaces law." Ned stared at him for a long, heavy moment, then turned away. He remembered the fire, the chaos, the shrieks of Lannister men drowning in green flames. The war was not over. It had simply changed shape. Outside the walls, Robb Stark stood at the head of his army, his direwolf Grey Wind pacing at his side. The boy who had ridden south for his father was gone. In his place stood a general, a hardened one. When Ned rode out to greet him, their embrace was brief, strong, and silent. "You held the line," Ned said. "You won the war," Robb answered, but both knew better. That evening the great hall was filled with lords. Baratheon, Tully, Arryn, even Martella envoys watched from balconies above. The Tyrells had sent a raven promising aid and a marriage proposal. Everyone wanted a stake in the new kingdom. It was time. Stannis Baratheon walked to the Iron Throne. For the first time, he climbed its steps. The crowd held its breath. And then he turned. "I will not rule by sword alone," he announced. "This realm needs law, it needs peace, and it needs a hand who understands honor better than any man alive." He looked to the side, toward a stunned Ned Stark. "I name Lord Eddard Stark as Hand of the King, and I will listen to his counsel, whether I like it or not." Gasps filled the room. Some smiled, some scowled. Varys bowed deeply. Littlefinger grit his teeth behind a mask of false applause. Ned stood, uncertain. This was not what he had wanted, but it was what the realm needed. Later, in private, Ned faced Stannis again. "Why me?" Stannis didn't look at him. "Because you won't lie to me, even when I want you to." That night, peace returned to the capital for a time. Raven messages flew across Westeros. The war is over. The king sits the throne. The wolf guards his side. But shadows crept just behind the curtain. In the Westerlands, Tywin Lannister sat in Casterly Rock with a face carved in stone. Beside him, Queen Cersei held her son Joffrey's hand. The boy king's face was twisted with rage. "We'll return," she whispered. "We'll burn them all." And across the narrow sea, in the heat of the Red Waste, Daenerys Targaryen cradled a black-scaled hatchling on her shoulder, staring toward the west. "The throne belongs to me," she said softly, "and fire remembers." So while King's Landing sang of peace, while wolves guarded the gates and Stannis wore his crown of steel, the Game of Thrones was far from over. It had only just begun. In the weeks that followed, King's Landing looked like a city reborn, but beneath the cobbled streets and behind closed doors, old games played on. Ned Stark, now Hand of the King, sat in chambers that had once belonged to men like Jon Arryn and Tywin Lannister, men who'd either died for truth or used power like poison. He wanted neither of those ends. Yet trouble knocked daily. The small council was now a patchwork of enemies and uneasy allies. Varys remained, slippery as ever. Sir Davos had taken over naval affairs, and Littlefinger, to Ned's dismay, still controlled coin for now. "Gold is the blood of the kingdom," Littlefinger reminded him with a mocking grin. "And it flows faster when people are afraid." Ned didn't answer, but he made a note to bleed the spider dry soon. Elsewhere, Stannis ruled like a hammer, blunt, hard, and cold. He enforced new laws, swiftly executing corrupt gold cloaks, dissolving Lannister marriages, and banishing Pycelle to the Citadel for serving liars. The Rome was watching, some with hope, some with knives. But the quietest threat came not from rebellion, but from a woman in red. She arrived in a black ship, robed in crimson, with eyes like dying embers. Melisandre of Asahay. She stood before Stannis as he held court. "I saw your victory in the flames," she said, her voice calm and eerie. "But the war is not done. The real darkness has not yet come." Stannis frowned. "You speak of Tywin." She smiled faintly. "No, my king. I speak of the true enemy, from the north, from the cold." Ned felt his blood chill. Later that evening, he approached her alone. "You speak in riddles," he said. "If you have something to say it plainly." Melisandre turned to him slowly. "You are a man of honor, but honor will not stop what is coming. The dead ride Lord Stark, and they care little for thrones." She spoke of white shadows, of a rising cold, of prophecies, and kings reborn in fire. Ned dismissed most of it, but the north in his bones whispered otherwise. Still, while shadows stirred in the background, trouble brewed in the light. Robb Stark, now hailed as Warden of the Riverlands, began asserting his strength. He reclaimed Harrenhal from Lannister holdouts and hung Ser Amory Lorch from its blackened walls. But power stirred ambition, and some riverlords whispered, "Why serve Stannis? Why not make Robb king of all?" The North remembered. Word reached Ned quickly. He sent a raven to Robb, firm but fatherly. "Victory is not a crown. Stay the course. The realm is watching you as a leader, not a usurper." Robb's reply was brief. "I serve the realm, but I do not bow to men who think my loyalty is cheap." Tension sparked. Father and son, two wolves, headed for different paths. And while Ned dealt with this rift, another snake slithered back into the game. Cersei Lannister. She sent a message from Casterly Rock, a simple offer: peace, marriage, trade, or fire. Attached was a sealed document bearing the Lion's Gold Seal, a marriage proposal between Myrcella Baratheon and a Martell prince. Varys warned, "The Lioness seeks to buy allies. The Martells have not forgotten Ilya, but gold heals old wounds." Ned saw the move clearly. Cersei wasn't retreating. She was building her web again, and this time from the outside in. He brought it to Stannis. "She's cornered, but not broken, Ned said. If the Martells join her, we could lose the south. Stannis' answer was swift. Then we strike Casterly Rock before she strikes us. But Ned held up a hand. No, that's what she expects. Give me leave to send someone less obvious. Stannis arched a brow. Who? Ned gave a rare smile. Tyrion Lannister. The imp had returned to the city quietly after the battle disgraced, bitter but alive. Now he drank in brothels and traded insults for coin. But Ned knew something most forgot. Tyrion was a Lannister who hated his family almost as much as Ned did. When Ned visited him in a dark tavern, Tyrion looked up with his usual smirk. "Come to kill me, Stark." "No," Ned said. "I need you to help destroy your sister." Tyrion raised his cup. "Now that, down, sounds like a proper family reunion." Outside, the winds shifted, ravens flew faster, and in the far north, beyond the wall, a horn blew once, twice, and then a third time. The long night was waking. Snow fell gently in the north. But this was no ordinary snow. It came with a silence that smothered the woods, a stillness that frightened even the direwolves. At Castle Black, men stood atop the wall with eyes wide, breath visible in the freezing air. The third horn had blown not once in 100 years. The dead were marching. Samwell Tarly, shaking, sent a raven south. It carried a single message: they are real. The White Walkers have returned. By the time the raven reached King's Landing, the capital was drowning in tension. The city buzzed with whispers of strange fires in the skies, black ships near Old Town, and Lannister spies caught in the dungeons. But nothing hit harder than Sam's message. Ned Stark read the letter in silence. He had always believed in the cold truths of the world, but now he saw that everything they'd fought for, thrones, banners, vengeance, was dust before what came from the north. That same evening, Melisandre approached him on the castle walls. Her red robes flickered like flame in the wind. "You see now," she said, her voice calm, "the real war was never in the south." Ned didn't answer her directly. "What does your god want?" She turned her glowing eyes toward the north. "For the living to burn the dead, and for the true king to rise." But Ned had grown tired of gods. He summoned a council. Stannis, Robb, Davos, Tyrion, Varys, and even Littlefinger sat around the great table reluctantly united. "We have fought Lannisters, traitors, and each other," Ned began, "but now something worse comes for us all." Stannis crossed his arms. "If this is truth, then we ride north." "No," said Tyrion, sipping from his cup. "We don't ride. We march together, or we all die." Robb nodded. "The North remembers, and we will lead the fight." But others were hesitant. Lords of the Reach still mourned Mace Tyrell, poisoned by Lannister wine. Martell envoys remained bitter. The Vale still trusted no one but their own. So Ned made a choice. He would ride himself to every great house, every stubborn lord, not as hand, not even as warden of the North, but as a father, soldier, and man who had seen too much war. Before leaving, he gave one last order. Tyrion Lannister was to go to Casterly Rock. Tyrion laughed bitterly. To play diplomat for the wolves and dragons. "No," Ned said. "To end your sister. The realm doesn't need her alive." Tyrion paused, then smiled grimly. "Then I suppose it's time the lion did something noble." And with that, the kingdom stirred once more, not with swords drawn against each other, but with ancient fear. From the frozen tundra of the Wall to the warm fields of the Reach, men began to whisper a new phrase: "The long night is coming." Robb returned to the north to rally the bannermen. The Umbers, Karstarks, and Manderlys all answered. Even the Night's Watch, broken and scattered, stood behind Jon Snow a bastard, with the blood of the first men and the fire of leadership in his voice. In Dragonstone, Melisandre lit flames and cried out to her god. In the flicker, she saw shadows of skulls, blue eyes, and a crown of ash and snow. And far to the east, Daenerys Targaryen sailed west. Her dragons, now fully grown, darkened the skies. Her Dothraki rode restless. Her Unsullied stood ready. She had heard of the war, of the White Walkers, of the Iron Throne still cold and blood-stained. But she did not come to save. She came to claim. The final pieces were moving. Stannis, stone-faced, began drawing up plans for a march north. Tyrion vanished into the west, a dagger hidden in his sleeve, and vengeance hidden deeper in his heart. And Ned? Theo! From Old Town to the Eyrie, from River Run to Dawn, reminding lords and ladies of the truth behind the game they all love to play. When the dead rise, it will not matter who sits the throne, only who stands together. And as he crossed the snow-covered lands of the Neck, a direwolf howled in the dark. Winter was no longer coming. It was here.